We'll be talking about stratum calculations today. Some of the topics that we'll go over, we'll do obviously a quick review of the stratum calculations, how to get to the calculation screen, how to manipulate it to get the calculation that you want out of it. We'll go over a couple of common business calculations that incorporate doing some math, um, calculating differences and variances, and doing some differences, division, that type of thing. And then we'll look at using attributes and calculations as well. So if you have certain product attributes that you want to calculate against, such as like list price or maybe some sort of equivalized unit factor, you could obviously do that as well. We'll take a look at, there's actually a couple of new calc functions that we want to take a look at that make your calculation creation a little easier without having to go through, complicated syntax. We've provided some functions that'll allow you to do some things much quicker and easier. And then if we have time, we'll take a look at time dimensions, using time dimension in a calculation, although we may not get to that. Today, like I said, let's take a look at, how would we calculate something really simple, right? So something, I'm just going to create a new view just on the fly and just show you how simple, first of all, creating a new view obviously is a pretty simple thing. If I want to add dimensions to my rows, I can use my View Explorer to do these things. Here I'm selecting my level that I want to view the data at. So I've got sold to, maybe I search for a couple of product dimensions. And so I'll add those in, and then I'm going to go out and get a couple of measure items. We'll probably look at some sales data here. So I'm looking for my sales measures, and here's my sales amount. And my time unit will be month, and we'll look at current year only, January through current month. That'll be current year as well. So we'll add that column in. That's my year to date. And then we'll do the same thing for last year. So now I've got two columns for this year and last year's sales. So I was able to build that rather quickly, just from scratch. And I am, I've got 3 dimensions here that I've incorporated in my view. And then I've got 2 regular stored dimensions that I've got within my view as well, so that I can do some calculations on these 2 columns. So this is this year and last year's sales. All right, so now we want to introduce a new calculated column into the mix. I will now right click and add a calculated measure item. So that's obviously one way to get your calculated column into the view. You'll just simply right click where you want to insert it. So basically I just want it here at the end. So I'll just right click this last data column and do an add calculated measure item. So up pops this is really, at the end of the day, this is where you're going to build your calculation, right? So this menu here is what you really need to be more intimate with, obviously, so that you can understand it. First things first, I can expand out the different things that I have in my view. They're on the left side of the menu within my folders. As you can see, the view is basically summed up by hierarchies that you have within the view. And we know we have sold to brand and product because we obviously built the view from scratch. So those are the things, the hierarchies that I have in place. And then if I further expand out the hierarchy, for instance, for product, I can see that I've got a couple of attributes in place here. Now, I don't know if I want to use those attributes in my calculation, but as you can see, those came in as I added product, and I can add more if I needed to, but we'll take a look at that in a second. Expanding my measure items, we can see that there are the 2 measure items that I added this year and last year's sales. Pretty simple. if I expand out my MDX functions, you get all these different little folders here. And this is basically native MDX functions. So this is something that we provided for you so that you can get access to some of the native functions. And then for the viewer functions, and that's basically what I was talking about in the intro. These are the functions that we provided for you that takes some of the complexity away from writing some complicated calculations. We've, well, they're not overly complicated, but we've put in some value added functions here so that you don't have to worry about doing division and having to worry about divide by zero errors that might appear. So that takes care of the divide by zero. We've got the new count member. So if you want to do like a product count, we can actually start calculating that rather easily as opposed to doing the necessary MDX to define the syntax for the count. Well, now it's really simple. I just simply click on that, select what I want to count and the measure that I want to use for that count. And it's really that simple. So we'll go through some of that. And we'll take a look at how we would use some of these functions to do some of those calculations. But for now, I'm just going to add a variance column. So at this point, I'm just going to do the difference between those two columns so I can see the actual delta, the dollar amount delta between the two columns that I have within the view. So in that instance, I'm just going to really just do the math. I'm going to click in on my year-to-date column there that I see, my measure item for this year's sales. I'm going to put a dash in there for a minus, and I'm simply going to go click on the prior year sales. So now I'm basically doing math here. I'm doing this year's sales minus last year's sales, and I can always, at any point, I can validate the syntax for the calculation, and it will confirm that the syntax is valid. At this point, then I can go in and give it a display mask under my format pull-down menu there. I can then supply a display mask so that, obviously dealing with money here. So I would probably want to show my results that in money. Over here on the caption expression, I can write in a variance. Normally I would just do something like var $sign showing that it's a variance from my dollars. And that will be my column header. I click OK, the column then appears magically, and I've got my variance now, the delta between the two columns here at 8.5 mil for Wilder Foods. Here I can see Western Division coming in. Overall, the growth looks positive this year versus last. And, I can now sort on this column. If I wanted to see the bigger, wider gaps, doesn't necessarily mean that they're the highest growing customer, but these do have the bigger variances between this year and last year's sales. How would I find maybe perhaps a variance percent might be a good, or a growth, some sort of growth percent might dictate, which accounts are really truly growing faster or more, obviously bigger than others. How would I define this variance as a variance percent? So now I'm going to right click and add yet another calculated column here at the end. Of course, I get the ubiquitous calculated measure menu. So now I can actually, put my cursor there and get ready for my calculation. I come over here and I now see three objects now within my measure item folder. I've got my two objects that we had before, the stored measures here for this year and last year's sales. And what now appears to be my calculated column is now appearing as a measure item as well. So, well, that's good, because I actually probably am going to use that if I want to come in here, and there's a couple things I can do here. I can do a divide with zero. Maybe I want to take the variance all over last year's sales. That's one way to get a variance percent. So in that case, I could do a divide with zero check. And it's going to ask me for the numerator and the denominator, essentially. I'm going to select my variance as my numerator, and my denominator is going to be last year's sales. So basically, I'm taking the variance all over last year's sales. My format is going to be a percent sign, and I'm just going to round it up. I don't need decimals per se. And my column will be a variance percent instead of variance dollars. All right, let's validate this. Okay, the product likes the syntax. That's good. I'm going to go ahead and click OK to that. And now I get the variance percent column. And now I get growth, right? So now if I here I've got Wilder Foods up on top in terms of variance, and what I would think would be some of my top growing accounts would be Wilder Foods, or in essence, if I sort this in descending fashion on the variance percent column, well, it tells a different story. So now I can see that Penn Brands actually and Chicago's Finest, these two basically are in a dead heat in terms of variance percent growth. So this kind of puts the growth in perspective based on their dollars, obviously the variance amount, and then what they did last year in terms of sales. So, again, I was able to use the function the viewer function, divide with zero check. And, if I were to have any zeros in my denominator, it would then, just show a zero basically. So, that allows me to then drill down, obviously the calculations carry through, right? So now I can see the variance percents and the variance for Penn Brands now at the product brand level. So now it's just basically carrying it through. You can see the Bingling is coming in as my top product brand there at 43. A very big 43% growth. Well, it would be interesting to see now the products at that level here. We can see that it's one product driving the growth. Looks like cherries are in season. Now it's time to take advantage of obviously the sales there. We can see that their sales growth has got basically one product that's really taken off there. Now, here we can see a couple things. I've got some attributes here that also we saw these in the calculation window. There's the the effective date of the product, and also I see a product some sort of dimensional height there in inches for the product packaging. So, and we can use these calculations if we wanted to. We can calculate, for instance, do some date differences to see how long this product's been effective, stuff like that. So we'll do that in a second. But, again, just kind of returning back. If I were to then save this as a different view, obviously everything saves with me. And then I, wouldn't have to come in here and redefine the calculations and have to go through, those steps to get what I see here now. So, again, adding in calculations, this one way of doing that. Another way of adding in a calculation is using your data measurement, or basically it says pick what to do with your data. You can add calculations here as well. So if I click on that button, it then brings up this measure item menu that allows me to basically manage the different measure items within my view. And if I wanted to perhaps copy a calculation, I can actually do a copy on that, and it will then bring it up as a copy. And then I can then give this a different name, define a different calculation based on what's already there. So you may have, you can go through iterations of just calculations without having to create the calculation over and over again. You could just copy it from another calculation and do a save and basically give it a different name, and it would then appear as a different column of data there. So, this is a great menu to actually come in and manage the measures or quickly copy syntax from a calculation into another calculation very quickly and easily. And then there's the View Explorer. So if I want to open up the View Explorer by using the View Explorer button there, as you can see, it toggles on and off. And on the right-hand side, I can see, obviously the measure items that I can also see here, of course, in the data grid. And yet, I can come here and add a calculated measure item. So by adding it within the View Explorer as well, as you can see, it doesn't matter really where you add it in. It always comes back to this menu here, where I can then start, beginning my new calculation syntax. So, for instance, now we can take maybe advantage of that count member function. So if I wanted to come in here, do a count on my products so that maybe at sold to level, I have a clue of number of products that are being sold to each one of my accounts. So here by clicking in on the account member function, we can see that it brings over the function in which then I need to pick a level, and then I also need some numbers or a measure. So my level is going to be SKU or product. So I'm going to expand that and select that. It then fills in my product hierarchy in which I'll base my count on. And my count then for the measure item, I'm going to select year-to-date sales. My format's going to be a regular number. So it's just basically a whole number. And it will then also, I want to do like a SKU count column header for this. All right, I think we're set. I'm going to validate it, and it comes back good. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and click OK to this and apply those changes. And we can see here, there's my product count. Farm Fresh obviously has 9 products under it. And here's Penn Brands. I'm going to roll this all the way back to Sold To again. And looky there, I get a SKU count by account by the different product sold tos. So here I see that Penn Brands is coming in at 31. Who's buying the most product from me? The most distinct SKUs. Who's buying that from me? Wilder Foods is. That makes sense. They're one of my bigger accounts. So they're buying 63 different SKUs, unique SKUs. What are they? Well, now I can just take product and dump that down onto Wilder Foods. And, it says 63. So now it says 63 across the board, obviously, because now I'm at the SKU level. So, and then I can see that I've got 64 rows. What's that extra row? Well, if I go to the bottom, and go to the last page, I can see that it's the grand total, right? Yeah. So that grand total gets added into that, and that's why you see 64 rows up there. So don't worry about that. You might have a 1-row discrepancy between what you see in the row count up here versus what you see within the view. Okay. But what's cool here, obviously, is that, again, I'm able to do this type of analysis. Who's not? I mean, you can flip that, just clicking in on that sort here, Maple Tree. I need to concentrate more on these accounts here because they're not buying as much, less than half actually than my top account there. So now I can see that, well, what is Maple? I mean, from a product brand perspective, what are they buying from us? So, now I can see all the different brands and they look I mean, it's nice diversity there, but we just got to get the volumes up. We can see the SKU counts here or not. And then for one of my bigger brands here, I'm only selling five SKUs. And we know we've got way more, 9 SKUs out of that. So there's some growth capability here that, we'd like to see here. We definitely want to see Maple Tree, get a little more penetration there, right? So, that's the product count that's just been added to the version, latest version is 7.5. So if you're not on that version, make sure that you get on it, because not only do you get access to that new count feature there, but you also are able to do calculations against your attribute fields a lot easier. So let's take a look at that. For instance, at product level, normally you'd want to calculate. I could do some calculations against some numeric data. I'm just going to hide these particular attributes for now. And I'm going to add in an attribute. So I'm going to right click on product there and select add attribute relationship. And here it allows me to add in all the different attributes at the product level. And here I've got current list price. So let's get that in the mix and see what that looks like here. It brings in current list price. And so now one more thing, uh, I'll bring in a regular measure. I'll bring in my units, my sales units, so that I can calculate a extended price here. So I'm just defining the same time frame, year to date this year. I just want to make sure that we're looking at apples comparison here. Okay, so there's my units sales for what looks like 16 through 17. Don't want that. Okay, so 17 through 17. So I've got so basically year-to-date sales units. So I'm going to take this column here and I'm going to calculate that against this column over here, my list price. So basically those two columns I'm going to calculate. And so 47 times 22,000 units should give me somewhere in the ballpark of $1 million, probably more, because again, this is list price and we're doing some discounting. So let's add in the calc. I'm going to add in a calculated measure item. Once again, we see our wonderful expression window there for the calculation. And now I'm just simply going to do some math. So I want to basically first of all, I need to go into hierarchies because that's where my attribute is, right? So if I go into product and expand product to the attributes, here then I can see the current list price times or asterisk against my units, that new measure that I added in. This is going to be a money display mask because I'm calculating against a numeric dollar amount value. And we're going to call this list price extended or EXT. Let's validate it. Looks good. Let's bring it in. And there you have it. So now we can see that we are in the ballpark there, but it is more. Well, at this point, we can do a discount now, can't we? And I can move this stuff. Perhaps maybe I want my list price over there by my net sales. So then I can see kind of the differences. I can eyeball the differences here if I wanted to. And then also if I want to add in a discount percent, right? So if I wanted to come in, now I can take advantage of this. I can say, well, let's take list price minus my year-to-date sales. That's my variance. And then, I can then call this my list price variance. Okay, that's going to be dollars, of course. So I bring that in, right? So there's my variance between list and net sales there. And then once more, I'll get that calculation go back into my functions. I'm going to use that divide by zero check, and then I'm going to use that list price variance my denominator is going to be the actual net sales. I have to think about that for a minute. We're going to throw in a percent sign format. And this is my discount percent. And wanted to sort on that. And we can see the higher discounted items out there, or I should say products. Now, I want to see that by account. Just drag and drop customer sold to over there. And well, that's interesting. Oh, I see. Yeah, we lose that because the list price goes away. I'm glad I did that because at this point you can see list price is only stored at product level. So the moral of this story is if you want this at customer sold to level, you would probably need to calculate that coming into the database as opposed to, and then have it, that data would then be available at, all the sales, levels. Here, we're dynamically we're calculating it within the view. So this really, at this point, you could really only do this calculation at this dimension level, because that's really the only place you have list price stored, which makes sense. So if I drill away from product, the list price goes away and I'm going to lose my discount percent. Well, actually, and this remains to be interesting, because as I drill into it, so for cherries, I can see that there's my discount percent for cherries for all the accounts. So as long as you have that present within the view, as long as it's visible, right? If I were to then drag and drop sold to, as you can see, it's not visible any longer, and now you're going to lose your discount percents. So there's some things you can do here. For instance, I can come in and I can drill in on the different products and see what the discount percents are by product, by sold to. Pretty good. I mean, still you can do quite a bit of analysis on that. I could drill on all products and go to all customers. That would take some time to calculate, but depending on how many combinations you have, as long as you have your paging turned on, it shouldn't be too bad. So now I've got a scrolling view of all my products and sold tos and what their discount percents are. And I did not have to worry about whether this was a number. Like for instance, attributes, you can store in numbers or numeric values, that or alphanumeric. You can actually now, with the new version, you can dictate what's text versus numeric for your attribute columns. That is new. That is also part of the latest release of 7.5. So we've cleaned up a lot of things in terms of not having to worry about certain things. Like, for instance, your attributes being text fields. Before, we had to convert them before we did any math against them, and it just required more syntax. So now as you can see, I think we've simplified things quite a bit. I was able to do and build this view, as you can see, within a few minutes. Obviously, we've been working together now for a half hour, but I was able to build this rather easily without really jumping through too much syntax, and getting too complicated with it. As a matter of fact, it was quite easy. So again, check it out, 7.5. It's our latest release. We're just making things easier and easier for you guys to build your views and do your analysis. And it comes with a glossary as well. So I can always turn on my glossary and I can get, terms for the different measures that I have within my view. What is sales amount? So now you have a definition for the users out there that, well, sales reflects the value of sales bucketed by invoice date. Typically, this measure includes return information, so sales net of returns. So now you have more of a metadata library and glossary of all the different terms that you have within Stratum that users can now look up and feel comfortable with, understand the data better, essentially. So all part of the latest release of 7.5.